Nancy W.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Hello. My name is Nancy. I'm an alcoholic. I belong to Ancaster 12 and 12. Oh my God, isn't it good to be back? Right? I was just chatting to my new friend Tanya here, who at 16 months sober is doing service at the ORC. Look at you. And Kat, I know, right? And both Kat and Tanya are Zoom babies, right? And I overheard a conversation in the washroom, because there's other meetings there. And these two women were like, I'm a Zoom baby too. And they're walking around with the best ever exposure therapy to Alcoholics Anonymous at the ORC. Oh my goodness. So great. Is there anyone else here who sobered up digitally through our global pandemic? Welcome. Oh, that's so great. So great. So great. I pray we served you well. You know, we were not going to be alone for long. The world shut down and we had this fascinating immediate digital pivot, and we knew we needed each other. We knew that we needed to carry the message. We knew that we had to connect, since the cornerstone of a disease like mine is fundamental disconnection. And so we did. We got online and we continue to carry the message as best that we can. I was speaking a while back with one of our past delegates who did not get the opportunity to attend the General Service Conference in New York, which is a pretty big deal in service. Right? And the delegates from all over North America listened to this fascinating prophetic quote or recording of our Bill Wilson. And years ago, Bill Wilson said, and they listened to his voice, he said, the steps are what has saved our life, and they will not change. The traditions born of our lessons learned and our challenges and mistakes, they are fundamental to our program, and they will not change. But then Bill Wilson said, but the way that we communicate, the way that we connect and reach out to each other must assuredly change. I know the man was a prophetic, you know, and it just, I am so happy to be here in person, and it's like old home week, and I'm seeing so many people that I haven't seen in so long, and we are at a fascinating point in our history that will continue to have repercussions and cascade into the fellowship of the future for years to come. We are the future of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, I'm here to do a job. Let's start with that. I was born in Hamilton, Ontario. I live in Dundas, a little town right beside Hamilton. It's a pretty small town. We like to say, been there, Dundas. You know, that's about all it is. Hamilton sobered me up. I owe my life to the good men and women and old-timers and lots of men in sweater vests who saved my life. We moved around a lot when I was a little girl. My family, my parents had emigrated from Scotland, and they came to Canada to build a life. They were to have a large family. They had a son, and then they had 5 girls. And I know. And you're like right there. You're talking to me. And I'm in the middle of the girls. I have 2 older and 2 younger sisters. And when I was growing up, my family, despite moving and around a lot, I had moved 7 times by the time I was 7 years old. And my mother finally put her foot down and she said, I cannot do it. You know, I cannot move one more time. And so we settled in Caledon in this old farmhouse. It was the second brick house built in Ontario. It happened to be condemned when we moved in, but Mum set upon fixing it up, and that's where I grew up. My father reminds me of a character in a play called Death of a Salesman, Willy Loman by Arthur Miller. And Dad was always looking for the big break. It was going to be around the corner, and we just kept moving. And that was my dad. My mother is an educated woman. She had gone to the University of Glasgow in Scotland and always had a professional job and sort of kept money coming in. And she really emphasized education to all of her children growing up. And I had these very successful older siblings. You know, they were super good. They were, you know, very athletic. They were straight A students. My brother was, you know, editor of the school newspaper, and I was very busy shoplifting. I was always getting detention. I was in trouble with boys. I had that problem middle thing. And the truth of it is that I grew up not feeling smart. And I tell you, that is my secret. That is my secret. That is the pain. That is the shame. And I don't know if I was ever really told that directly, but this is a disease of perception. And if that imprint in the cement doesn't get erased early, it's there for life. And I just grew up feeling that way, you know. Also, in this old condemned farmhouse where we grew up, it was sort of in a wealthier part of Caledon, and I became acutely aware immediately that other people had more. They just had more. And I felt deficient and ashamed that I was wearing bread bags, plastic bread bags, in my winter boots. And I would, you know, volunteer to go clean up the boots outside the classroom because, God, I didn't want anybody to know that mine were lined with bread bags, plastic bread bags. And we had enough, but I never felt like enough, you know? One of the things that I did that differentiated me from these successful siblings was acting. I love to act. My hero growing up was Carol Burnett. No, thank you. I'm talking to meetings and people don't know who Carol Burnett was. Oh my God. Like the pioneering, right? Like Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett. I love them all. And I would redo all of her sketch work in the living room and put on these variety shows. And I would make my younger sisters be, you know, Vicki Lawrence and Harvey Korman and Tim Conway. And we would redo all of her sketch work. And that's how I learned to love doing that. That is what made me feel okay. When I was in grade 9, 14 years old, I was at a high school where the musical is a big deal. And so I was in this musical, and at the end of the run of that play, there is a big party. There's a cast party. And I remember it was in the field. It was a kegger, you know, keggers. And my friends and I got really drunk. I remember I got drunk on beer and rye and creme de menthe. I know. It didn't look any better coming up, right? It's green. Creme de menthe is green, and it was really gross. And at the time, I had this big aching crush on John, the lead in the play. You know, I thought he was fabulous. And alcohol just gave me the strength to be courageous and go up and start, you know, talking to him and flirting with him, and then I started kissing him, and then I threw up on him. I know, and it was not good. And I had to get a drive home that night, and I remember that was on a Friday night. And by Monday morning, in the halls of that high school, I could feel people looking at me. They were looking at me, and it was this look that I was to get a lot in my alcoholic drinking career. It was this combination of contempt and pity and curiosity, right? Like his sister Hillary in Al-Anon, like, do you know what you did? Do you know what you said? You know, and it was a look that I was to get a lot. So I went along in high school, and then, you know how sometimes, at least for me, in my life, I can just decide to get it together. I can just decide self-will will kick in and I will, do really well and, succeed at work. And for a while, my life is okay. And my last year of high school was kind of like that. All of a sudden, I decided to get straight A's. And I became an Ontario scholar. And I became very fit. And I was a lead in the play that year. And it won a bunch of awards. So there, my life is good. I can get it together. Nothing wrong there. And I moved back to Hamilton to attend McMaster University in 1983. At university, I quickly gravitated to the party crowd and got a job in the campus pub called the Downstairs John, and that's where I spent a lot of my time and money, and that's where I hung out. In university, I took a full course load, and I would get straight A's in all of those subjects except one. Somehow I have a nasty, painful pattern of behavior whereby I need to sabotage. I don't let myself get past the goal line in any type of success. Somehow I had to fail one. I would get close to getting what I say I want, and then at the 11th hour, I will just do something to screw it up. And years later, one of my beloved sweater vests, old timer, man that I love, garage sale going, Wayne C. said, well, alcoholics, we choose the certainty of pain over the pain of uncertainty. Right? I know, because what might my life be like if I actually get that success, if I get that happy, normal life that I say I want? But oh no, not me. I'm used to the drama and the chaos, and I get addicted to living that unmanageable life. The unmanageability is part of the thrill, it's part of the adrenaline, and makes me feel alive. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous and my life started to get okay, I got really uncomfortable and needed to do something to bring back that toxicity, bring back that chaos. I went along and so I'm in university, and I used to drink and drive a lot. It's a huge part of my story, and not enough time to get into the amount of trouble that I did with that. But I have lost my car more times than I can tell you. My car was full of drunk bumps, those mysterious bumps that we have. And then I remember one time I was driving along the QEW in Oakville, by the Ford plant there, and I came to out of a blackout, and the whole side of my car is sparking and scraping against the guardrail. A while back, I was driving, and there was something wrong with my eye contact, and I had to drive like that for a while. And I thought, I have not done that in a long time. The nasty, terrifying habit. One time in university, I was coming out of I had partied in this residence, in this dormitory the night before, crashed there. I came out, and lo and behold, my car was in the parking lot. Once again, having had absolutely no recollection of driving it the night before, but there it is. And my friend immediately starts giving me grief over this. He said, I can't believe you've done this again. Get in the car, take it home, meet me for lunch. He's angry. And only this time there is something hanging underneath the car. And I couldn't draw attention to it. I saw it, but he didn't, and I could not bear to look at what I might have done. But, because I have that ability to live in chaos, live in the pain, and I can go through a very charged situation calmly, I got in that car and I pulled out, driving whatever it was underneath. And I came around the edge of the campus, and this man in a parking kiosk stops me and he says, Miss, you got something hanging underneath your car. And so I have to pretend, like I have to say, oh, really? And I do, and I pull over, and I stop, and I look under, and it was a huge clump of like landscaping grass. I took out a chunk of campus. And I immediately tried to think, wow, you blow things out of proportion. Wow, like that. But the truth, the absolute truth is that I know how dangerous I am. I know when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I heard people say that they thought they were bad, I knew that I was toxic. Okay? Like there was something so fundamentally wrong with me. Normal people don't do that, you know? And all I could bring home, the way that I could understand this toxicity is that I do not possess the ability to love and be loved. You know, as it says in our fourth step, an utter inability to form a true partnership with another human being. I don't have that. Never did. I was born without that DNA, that gene to love and be loved. A little while later, I was at another party at university and I am sexually assaulted. And I remember stumbling home that night knowing deeply that I cannot trust what I do, where I go, with whom after I start drinking. My grades are falling apart. Bad things are really starting to happen. I did not sit final exams, and instead of going to the big gymnasium with the rest of the students to write the final exams, instead I went to the library and I hid in the fourth floor of Mills Library in the back resource section where no one would find me. I hid. I hid in the middle of a library. Usually, when my life is on fire, that tends to cue up a geography cure. So to back up a little bit, when I grew up in that old farmhouse in Caledon, when we moved to the area, we befriended an elderly couple up the side road, up this rural area. Their names were Charlie and Sadie. They liked all of my siblings. They liked our entire family, but they especially liked me. And I liked that they liked me. They made me feel special. Sadie was a kind woman, a great cook. She would embroider cool things and like really pretty, exquisite things. And Charlie was a retired farmer, and he was a square dance caller, and he was a water diviner, if anybody knows what that is. A couple, okay, because that is a loss. I got a couple nods from old guys. That's great. Right? There's got to be a couple of you there, right? He could not only find the water, he could accurately determine the depth needed to drill when we went. And when I was a kid, I would go with him. And when people were building houses and needed water. And then when my life is really on fire at university, I make the falsely altruistic excuse that, well, you know, Sadie has passed away. Charlie's health is failing. He needs someone to take care of him. And so I quit school and I went back. And that's what I did. I grew up with this couple. I love them. They always called me kid. They never had any kids of their own, but they would call me kid. You know, we would be putting out, we would dig potatoes out in the back garden, and I would be putting them in this burlap sack. And he would always say, "Count them out, kid. Count them out." So I can tell you that when I went home to take care of Charlie, it was one of the worst times of my drinking. The pain for me of alcoholism is living a fraudulent life. It killed me that Charlie was thinking I'm some sweet young thing for helping him out. And the absolute truth is that I am hiding. I have a bottle of scotch hidden underneath the frozen peas in the freezer, and I'm smoking hash out by the asparagus bush, right? Like that's the truth of what is going on. There is the late great American artist, Andrew Wyeth, did a famous piece of art called Christina's World. And that was my life. I identify very strongly with the emotion in that piece of art. I was a lost, lonely woman, 23 years old, not having the resources to do it well, riddled by guilt for not doing a good enough job, bitter resentment for being in this situation, and genuine fondness for the man. You know, it was so hard. It was so hard. One night, there's a party in Toronto. My friend had called me up. It was about 9:30 at night, and Charlie was already asleep. I figure it's just an hour into the city. I'll see these people. Haven't seen them in a long time. I'll go for one drink, maybe two. That's it. And I'll be back. I'll be home by 1. He won't even notice me gone, right? you're ahead of me, right? Like, I know. I wake up in a strange place beside a strange someone. And I immediately freeze. Once again, I had to find the car. I hated having to find the car. And I will never forget hearing the bottles clank behind the driver's seat as I speed out of there and drive all the way home. And I get there, and when I get there, Charlie is not there. He is in the hospital. He had fallen in the night. A neighbor, he called for me for hours. He finally made it to a phone. A neighbor got him to the hospital, and that neighbor was waiting for me when I got home. He told me what had happened and that I should go to the hospital. And so I did. And I went into Emerge, and I'm talking to the nurse, and she's talking about the tests that they're running, and they think he'll be okay, and I can probably take him home. And I went into the emergency room, and this man just looked at me. He looked at me and he said, "Where were you, kid? Where were you?" I cannot tell you what that did to me. I hated my life with every fiber of my being. The self-loathing was complete. I couldn't stand that I had done this. And I had one of those hangovers, like just my tongue was dry, my head was rattling around, my stomach hurt. I kept having to leave to dry heave in the bathroom. There's a man in Texas, a speaker, Danny B. From Texas. He says, "A hangover with skin on it." Right? I had me one of those. And so I stayed with Charlie for most of the day. And then I went home to my mother's house, or I went home to the farmhouse. By this time, my parents had divorced and they're split up. Dad's living somewhere in Toronto. I am in this farmhouse kitchen, and all of a sudden I hear my voice say, "Mom, I think I have a drinking problem." And I do not know if you have ever shared with a non-alcoholic concern about your drinking, but oh my God, they blow that out of proportion, right? Because she heard that, and she immediately got worried, and then she starts peppering me with all these questions like, "What do you mean a drinking problem? When do you drink? How much do you drink? Why do you drink?" Blah, blah. Right? But now I'm like, yeah, never mind. It's all good, right? And so I have to dredge up some crocodile tears, and I pretend that I'm upset. And so I end up, to make a long story short, my family is academic. We are academic atheists. We like to get a lot of degrees. We like to take courses. We think we can figure it out. We can figure it out. You put forth enough effort, you can do anything. So to make a long story short, she knew someone who was starting a pilot project at a Toronto treatment center for controlled drinking. They're doing it again. They're way ahead. They're ahead. You're like 3 minutes ahead of me. So I know, right? But I get enrolled in a course to control my drinking. And the deal was, it was a 10-week course, and I got 2 drinks 3 times a week. Like as if, right? So I did not listen. I would save them all up. Or I would, they were not explicitly clear about alcohol's cousin in leaf form, so I had to manage it with that. But I ended up, and I remember when they, at the end of that 10 weeks, they had this telephone interview call, and they said, "How are you?" And I'm telling them, "I'm great. I'm so great, but I have a scotch with ice that I need to keep away from the phone." They probably shouldn't hear the clinking of the ice, but I'm like, "Thank you so much. Learned a lot. All good now." So it was, shortly thereafter, Charlie died. And I knew that he and Sadie were leaving their house to me. They didn't have any kids, and I started to live there, and I had 2 roommates, girlfriends from university, and we were all working and commuting to our respective jobs. But I knew that there was something wrong with me. I knew there was some ill-defined void, and they were quickly on my case about drinking. So I figured, what my problem is that I never finished my education. If I had a degree, I would feel better. And so I sold Charlie's house, moved back to Hamilton, bought a house there, and I went back to Mac, and I finished my degree, and I didn't feel any better. So I thought, well, maybe money. I need money. People who have a lot of money look good, so they must feel good. So I set about making money. And at first I lost money making money. And then even when I made a little bit of money, it did not change anything. It did not change anything. So, okay, I thought it's not education, it's not money. I know. I need a man. Someone to complete me, had you at hello, I need that. I need that Prince Charming, right? I need all of that. And oh my God, what a mess. What a mess, what a mess, what a mess. I made whomever I was seeing at the time completely responsible for my happiness, which is the quickest recipe for disaster, right? And when they did not make me happy, I actively resented them. But I couldn't leave them because that would mean I was alone, and no, we don't do that. So I would, I always had someone sort of waiting in the wings, and so there was some overlap. I remember a friend of mine said, "You were monogamish," right? And you know how Tarzan swings through the jungle and he does not let go of one vine until he's got a firm grasp on the next? So men were a little bit like that for me. They were just, it's a wonderful distraction. It made me feel, wanted and needed and all that, and they got me out of scrapes, and it was a cruel thing to do and amends to be made, right? It was just awful. And that was, I caused people pain. It was December 1992. I'm in this new job. I was one of those employees where you get out just before they know you. Just before things hit the fan, I'm out of here. But I interview well. I'm reasonably intelligent, and so I had this new job. I was in the company 2 weeks. They invited me down to Orlando for a big sales conference, and I work really hard on the Friday, and I work really hard on the Saturday. And on the Saturday, there's a banquet, and the banquet has an open bar. I know. And I got so drunk. I got inappropriate drunk. I got sticking my index finger in the president's chest drunk. We call that a CLM, or career limiting move. Right? You won't be with them long, and your days are numbered. And then I got legless drunk, and they had to pour me into a cab and get me back to the hotel. And on the morning when I wake up in my hotel room, I am so hungover, and I have to go downstairs to the hotel to meet these new coworkers because we're driving to the airport to fly back to Toronto. And so I'm downstairs in this hotel lobby, and everyone is looking at me. And they're giving me the exact same look I got in high school. Contempt, pity, curiosity, only this time I feel transparent. I'm so exposed. I'm so humiliated. I cannot believe I've done this again. And this man in the company comes over to me and he says, "Hey, I hear you were quite the party girl last night." And I'm like, I don't even really remember. And he said, "You don't remember? Wow. A blackout is a real sign of alcoholism." Right? And I felt slapped with that A word. It landed. And my God, my higher power, puts these coincidences in my life, because this man just happened to have a boarding pass with a seat assignment next to me on the plane. He just happened to be wearing an AA ring. He just happened to have just celebrated a year sobriety. And so he talked to me for the whole 3 hours on the way home to Toronto. And where was I going? I was buckled in. I had it's not like I was that willing, but I was keenly, frighteningly interested in what this man had to say. He was, as our big book says, a man well armed with the facts about himself. He did not chastise me. He did not warn me. He did not judge me. He told me his story. That's it. Bill Wilson says, all I have is my story. And so a week later, I come down the stairs of Ancaster 12 and 12. And the first thing that struck me about Alcoholics Anonymous, it took me a week, but I made it to a meeting, and the first thing that I experienced with you was laughter. You laugh a lot. And I remember thinking, that's so sad. Right? Like, what have you got to laugh about? You can't even drink. Right? Like, I thought it was totally false. I thought you were putting it on. I did not believe you. And let me tell you, 30 years ago this year, I was at the ORC in 1993, and I was listening to this one speaker, Patty, as someone had bought me a ticket, and this year I bought somebody else a ticket, although that doesn't count now because, maybe Daniel Taping Service can edit that part out. I got a free ticket to the ORC in 1993, and there was this one woman from Illinois, Patty, and Patty was talking about the old timers that helped her get sober when she first came in. And there was this, there was this one old timer who would drive her to the meeting. He was a bad driver, and he would try to explain the entire big book in the 8 minutes that it took to go from door to door, And she was saying, and he was a bad driver, and he would screech out of her driveway, and she would go, and he would run right through a red light, and she would go, and he would cut off a pedestrian, and she would go, and they get to the parking lot, and they're walking to the church, and on the way to the meeting, this old timer says, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm no medical person, but I do something about your asthma. Right? And I was sitting at the ORC, and I found myself laughing. And it shocked me. I thought, oh my God, I'm actually this is real. This is actually funny. This is we are not a glum lot. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. This woman was funny. And I stopped laughing because I couldn't believe that was about to be a part of who I am, that I could actually enjoy laughing. It was a deal that I had made with myself that, okay, I'll join AA and I will stop drinking, and the price that I am willing to pay is that I will never laugh again. I'm going to be overly dramatic about it, but that's absolutely what I thought. So I stayed in Alcoholics Anonymous. For, a couple months. But the truth is that I did not get powerlessness. I did not concede to my innermost self. I did not, I didn't get that necessary humility, and I tried to do what you said, but not really. I thought that you were bad, but I was not as bad. You said, stay away from the men. It is a fellowship, not a ship of fellows. I get that. I'm sorry. That is the cheesiest line, right? I'm sorry about that. But surely that cannot apply to me, right? And so of course, about 5 weeks sober, I meet my soulmate. And it quickly became a very dangerous and bad thing. It just became a bad thing. And it was absolutely my accountability, my lack of humility and powerlessness to do that, and unwillingness to take direction, but that absolutely helped lead me out. It turned dangerous, and he was not good, and so the best way was just to bolt out of AA, and I did, and I drank. And then I drank more and more, and I discovered 4 months of pain that I did not know existed. My job was hanging on by a thread. The bank was coming for the house. I was months in arrears. I had credit agencies calling me. I was a TV junkie. I would sit I would lay on the couch and watch television around the clock. David Letterman was on at 12:30, and then there was this jazz global music thing. And then I'd pass out for a couple hours, and at 4:30 in the morning, there was this claymation thing called Davy and Goliath. Right. And I get it, right? It was a Christian thing, and the dog was the kid's conscience, and he would say, "Don't steal the apple, Davy." And I would watch this, and I would half buzzed, and I would feel, like that was my life. That was absolutely my life. But the denizens had set in, and I couldn't answer the phone, and I couldn't get out of the house, and I absolutely, I was imploding. One day, on August 28th, 1993, I was turning 29 years old. My friend Kyle, who had gone to McMaster with me, called me up and said, "Nance, it's your birthday. Let's go." And so we went out drinking, and we went bar hopping and drank, and were really drunk, and we came back to my place to drink some more before we were going to hit the bars for last call. Back at my house before last call, Kyle is loaded. He's loaded and sick, and he's throwing up off my back deck. And all I remember thinking is that, man, if this guy keeps throwing up, I'm missing last call, right? That was going to be a problem. But for some reason, he just went home. And for some other reason, I just went to bed. I went to bed. And when I woke up, I was 29. I was 29. And there was something significant about that number. On the morning after my 29th birthday, August 28th, 1993, I saw my life ahead of me. I saw my life at 39 and 49 and 59, and nothing was changing. I absolutely knew without a doubt that I was going to be living an alcoholic life. And I tell you, I did not come here because I thought I would die. I came here because I knew that I would live. I knew that my family would not let me be on the streets. I knew that I was going to be I was going to be sucking out all of their resources and love and trust. I know lots of us blow ourselves out in car accidents and suicides, but most of us take a long, long time to die. And we take out kids and marriages and jobs and integrity, everything, and we just suck it out. And I absolutely knew that was going to be my life. I knew it. And so I said, "God, help me. Help me." And I picked up that phone, that heavy phone. Back in 93, it was still on the wall, people. I had one of those long cords, I could walk with it. And I picked up the phone and I called my first sponsor, Viola. May she rest in peace. And she said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yes." And we went to a meeting, and I don't remember anything about the meeting. The first week sober was hard. I got fired. The bank came for my house in a power of sale. I had stomach problems directly due to alcoholism, and my doctor wanted me in a treatment center immediately. My mother had to come sign power of attorney papers because while I was going to be in this treatment center and therefore institutionalized, I could not make legal decisions on my behalf as the lawyers in the bank came for the house, and everything came tumbling down. It was a bad week. Right? And I'm at the Rock Chapel group, and I talked to old George Taylor. Oh my God, I love that man. He wore his pants so high, and he would always have a Werther's. And he said, I was at the Rock Chapel group in Waterdown, Ontario, and I said, and I'm telling him this, and I got to go in the treatment center, and my family's not talking to me, and I'm crying. And this man put his arms on my shoulders, and he said, "You're going to be okay, And I tell you, I did not know that. I didn't. But George was so sure, and he was so right, So I go into the treatment center, and the treatment center was a good idea because they helped me with step one, because they drilled powerlessness into me, come do your chores because you're powerless, go to a meeting because you're powerless, go to this group therapy, you're powerless. Like, I get it. Oh my God, I get it. They take themselves very seriously in there, if you've ever. But I ended up getting extra weeks in the treatment center for attitude problems. Because part of this, 28 days, part girl interrupted life of mine is that the problem in the treatment center was that I kept getting mistaken for a therapist. I know. I love that. That is my shtick. That is my shtick. There is a lot, I promise you, there is so much pain hidden behind the mask of middle-class respectability. It is a good place to hide. You know how sometimes newcomers come into our meetings and they look beat up and their eyes are glassy and their skin is yellow and you think, oh, good, buddy. Like, I hope you are in enough pain to stay. I'm on the lookout for makeup and a smile. Because I wonder if she feels as badly as I did, right? And I promise you, I have been in some lovely homes in Toronto and Hamilton and Oakville where women die, absolutely die of this disease, and they tend to be surrounded by other family members who are emotionally invested in keeping that mask on. If you know what I'm talking about, I beg you, leave this conference with a fistful of numbers. Get out, come out, talk to us, get working on the steps. We know, besides, you're already here. We know why you're here. It's not for the coffee. Although it's better here. There's some places, oh my God, AA coffee, worst ever. But, so anyway, I finally get out of the treatment center and I land in the belly of AA. I went to a meeting every single night for the first 2 years of my sobriety. I just did. And I don't know if you recall, but way back in the winter of 93, 94, we had record-breaking winters. We had storms on top of storms on top of storms, and businesses and schools were regularly closed. And I had a car, but I didn't have a valid driver's license, insurance, or money to repair it. And Viola said, "You're not driving." So I was on the bus. I was on the Hamilton bus going to a meeting every night. And members of Ancaster 12 and 12 gave me old grapevines, and the bus would slug its way through the snowy city, and AA was always open. I got to tell you, you shocked me, right? There was always coffee on. There was always someone to greet me. There was always a meeting. How is that possible, right? And the level to which Alcoholics Anonymous went to members, you gave me a meeting, and often just 2 or 3 of us in those meetings would, the length to which you were of service deeply humbled me and gave me the gift of service in kind. I knew that this was where the action was, right? I knew that this was the nugget, the beauty, the power of the fellowship, that it was in service. So stay tuned for now, the service PS, like public service announcement for service, which is still the best kept secret in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're not doing something, oh my God, we need everybody here. Get in. We have 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 concepts of service. We have recovery, unity, and service. And a 2-legged stool does not stand well. Get all 3. And they say that the worst sin in Alcoholics Anonymous is not knowing what your gift is. And because we need so many different types. I don't know where you're good. Maybe you love to greet every single week at your meeting. Maybe you want to talk in jails and schools. Maybe you want to do service at the district area. Maybe you are one of those people that can perform miracles in the parking lot after the meeting with the newcomer. I don't know. But I tell you, Alcoholics Anonymous is a wonderful place to be, but hasn't been complete until you got here. because you're bringing something, and we need it. End of PSA. So I like to say I sobered up in meetings and garage sales because there was two guys, Wayne and Harold. Wayne drove a big old caddy. He was a short guy, wore a Greg Norman golfing hat. Harold was a big guy, cowboy hat, drove a white pickup. They would pick me up at 7 a.m. on Saturday mornings, and we would go to these garage sales. And by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had gone to like 9 garage sales, had way too many Tim Hortons, that temple of 12-step worship that we have, and all this stuff for like $4, right? And they saved my life. They absolutely saved my life. I love garage sales, and I owe my life to those two men. I got into service, and I did the steps, and I worked with my sponsor, and I did the deal. I reclaimed a connection with my family, with my mother. I am her executor. Shortly after I was sober, a cousin my age, we had attended McMaster together, was in a terrible accident, and she is permanently, physically, and mentally handicapped, and I am her legal guardian. Like all of these things that I get to be is because the hub and the wheel of my life is Alcoholics Anonymous. AA allows me to be the wife, the mother, the daughter, the sister, the friend, the neighbor, the writer, whatever. That is, I get to be all of that because I am here. Because I am here. How am I doing for time? Look, she's on it. Awesome. I want to name a few names. I love that we're back. I love that we are back. I love that, the Zoom babies have got deer in the headlights. I love that you're here. I love that you're back. We owe our life to people who have gone before us. And I know that there are people that we lost over the past few years. So I want to mention some names of people who were important to me. Mary F. There were 3 pioneering women in Alcoholics Anonymous in southwestern Ontario, Wynne, Dolly, and Mary. Wynne Donahue was the first delegate to serve to go to GSO, to go to New York. Mary was a kind, amazing woman, and I would sit for hours in her apartment, and she was very, very short, and she happened to have really big ears and very thinning hair, and one day I said, Mary, you are so smart, you're like Yoda. You even look a little bit like Yoda. And that was a mistake, but live and learn, right? Like that. And her family, when she died, Mary left me her big book, and Bill Wilson signed it. I treasure nothing more. Nothing more. George Taylor with the pants so high and always with the Werthers, you're going to be okay, Ivan G., our past delegate and man that I love, he rose through, the servant structure, and he was our delegate, and he was a man with a speech impediment. He had a stutter. And one service assembly, a bunch of other DCMs and I we're fooling around in the back, and we're not really listening. And so Ivan came back to give us hell for that. And he said, look it. If you don't smarten up and pay attention, I'm going to say the long form of the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts. And we're like, okay. I love that man. He said that I was like a daughter to him, and I felt that way. Leona H. Oh my God, Leona H. She was the wife of a prominent surgeon and had the best hiding places for booze ever, and was an amazing drunk and helped save hundreds of lives in the Hamilton area. On her deathbed, her family called me, and through her oxygen mask, she says, goodbye, darling girl. And all to say, we are the future of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are going to be the old timers, because they're coming. they're coming. India, not too long ago, a while ago, had their Jack Alexander moment where they put on television after an interview daytime show, their sort of version of Oprah, they did a segment on alcoholism. They put Alcoholics Anonymous on the screen after the show, and 3 minutes after the end of that show, the website crashed. And the phones and other service centers, other service areas in the world helped return every single call that came in by the tens of thousands. Time Warner. There is a coffee table book that I have in my living room, and it's called 80 Days That Changed the World. And that company looked at the last century, and you know, they were celebrating 80 years as a company. There were 80 days that changed the world, and they had Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, and Jackie Robinson in baseball, and the Berlin Wall coming down. And there on page 25 is Bill and Bob having a coffee. Right? We have such a blessing and such a responsibility to carry the message. I am not missing the gene to love and be loved anymore. Service taught me that. You taught me that. I forgot to talk about, I met a boy, fell in love. He's not in AA, he's a civilian, but he's nice anyway. We have 2 sons. My Eric and my son Scott are the joy and love of my life. I have a dog who loves me. And I have a sober fridge. And I'll end with this. When I was drinking, my fridge was disgusting. I had like biology things happening in the back of margarine containers and whatever, and it was gross. Or in the freezer there would be a broken beer bottle because I passed out before I get cold quickly. I'd be so mad that I wasted it. But if you were to come into my kitchen, and I have a fellowship holiday party every year, and you're all invited. If you were to come into my kitchen and open my fridge, you would see that it's colorful. And that is what, to our newcomers, that is what sobriety is. It is incredibly colorful. I got fruits and vegetables in the crisper. I have milk and juice on the door. You know, eggs are in their little egg beds. I love that. I love that. I love that. I have a husband who loves me. I have children that I have raised. I have a meaningful and purposeful work. I believe I am doing what he would have me do because I'm working pretty hard to build a life he finds acceptable. May we all go on for as long as he needs us. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for saving my life.